Welcome to December's Word of Life podcast presented by Focolare Media. My name is Nick Cianfarani. In today's episode, Sharry Silvi shares her adventures of seeking employment at the United Nations and miraculously succeeding. Marc St-Hilaire tells us about a difficult work situation and how spending time with a colleague helped transform it into a positive one. And finally, Rose Schmitz reminds us that when we choose to love, especially in seemingly impossible situations, God will do the rest. This month, the scripture phrase is taken from Luke chapter 1, verse 37. For nothing will be impossible with God. Before we dive into the stories, I'd like to ask Tom Rowley to give us a short introduction.
When we place our trust in God, we open ourselves to a realm of infinite possibilities. This profound truth reminds us that no matter how insurmountable our challenges may seem, God's power and love can transcend any obstacle. Whether we face personal struggles, daunting tasks, or seemingly hopeless situations, faith in God empowers us to overcome and achieve the extraordinary. His guidance and strength are always available to us, turning the impossible into the possible and filling our lives with hope and miracles.
And now I'd like to introduce you to a special guest from Rome, Italy. Sharry Silvi is a pioneer of the Focolare and served the movement in North America for decades. She was instrumental in making it possible to have Focolare founder Chiara Lubick come to the United States on various special occasions. On one such occasion, Chiara spoke at the Malcolm Shabazz Mosque in Harlem, New York, to hundreds of Muslim Americans, followers of W. Dean Mohammed and the Muslim American Society. Hi, Sharry. Welcome. How are you?
I'm very glad to see you.
I have been reading your wonderful book and the many experiences that are so beautiful. And one of them really caught my eye because it related so well to this month's Word of Life, that nothing is impossible with God. I'd love for you to share that story with us.
My experience goes back to 1961, to our first days in New York, when we were still just in three: Joe Vernuccio, Antonio Petrilli, and myself. The masses of people in the streets was perhaps what struck me most about New York. I walked amidst this anonymous crowd of persons that I wanted to love. It frightened and fascinated me. We had brought a long list of names and addresses from Rome, given to us by members of the movement in Italy. Where should we begin? We decided to visit a woman named Vera Giannini, the sister-in-law of a member in Naples. She welcomed us with great joy as we reminded her of a dear relative. We explained our purpose and what we intended to do. It may have sounded absurd, and we expected her to discourage us, suggesting that we return to Italy because there was much to be done there, and our unity project seemed like sheer madness. Instead, Vera displayed great interest in our life, our project, and the fact that we were seeking employment. She advised us to go to the United Nations as the General Assembly was about to convene. The following day, Joe, my moral support, and I entered the UN personal office where I managed to get an interview. The woman who assessed me had a pleasant bearing and an air of intelligence and warmth. The brief examination was remarkably simple, leaving me puzzled. Could securing a job at the United Nations truly be this easy? No. As she escorted me to the elevator, she whispered, "Don't count on being hired. Another candidate has received high recommendations." The elevator doors closed on those words. A minute later, I stood at the main entrance, where Joe waited, praying for a successful outcome. "You can stop praying," I informed her. "I won't be hired here." I gave her the details of what had happened as we made our way home. But Joe refused to be discouraged. "You know, if that's the extent of our faith, then New York will conquer us instead of us conquering New York." Each month, throughout the entire movement, and still to this day, a scripture passage called the Word of Life is proposed as a guiding principle for our daily life. Let's live the Word of Life, we decided. That month it was, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." How beautiful it was to look at the skyscrapers on the way home, knowing that we were children of God, children of an all-powerful God who even counted the hairs on our heads. I was happy to be here in New York, an enormous city, but all the same destined to find new life in unity. If we are one, the world will be one, we concluded. A few days later, I received a call from the personnel office. If I was still interested, the job was mine. Even with my newly rekindled faith, it came as quite a surprise. It was true. We were children of God, carrying the highest recommendation in the world.
I want to thank you so much for sharing this beautiful experience. A very blessed Christmas filled with peace and joy and love.
Thank you, thank you.
If anyone is interested in acquiring a copy of Sharry's book, you can write to me and I will make sure the order gets into the right hands. Write to nick.cianfarani@focolaremedia.com. Marc, welcome to our podcast. It is a great joy to have you with us today.
Wow, I'm so lucky to see you again. It's a joy.
Yes, it's been a while, and I still remember the wonderful years we had together in Toronto, living in the community there, and already there you had shared some adventures and challenges from your workplace. But before you share that with us, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Marc, like you said. I was born in Montreal in Canada, and I'm a consecrated member of the Focolare movement. And after a period of religious formation in Italy, then I did my studies in computer science in Toronto. And I worked in my field for 25 years, specifically in computer programming, project management, and also as a manager of a sector in the high-tech industry. And now I live in Italy, in Rocca di Papa, and I'm working at the international headquarters of the Focolare. And you might find this interesting for your podcast. I'm actually part of a team made of people from different countries and walks of life who write the text of the monthly Word of Life, which gets translated and published in 23 languages all around the world.
Thank you for doing that. It's a great work for all of us. But we are now very happy to listen to your story, your experiences. So I hand the microphone over to you.
So you asked me about experiences at work, and thinking about the December word of life, for nothing will be impossible with God. There are two particular experiences that came to mind. So at work, I was entrusted with a group of 10 engineers and who had survived the downsizing of their department. It was not an easy time, and the team had to be reorganized, and mutual trust had to be rebuilt. So this is an experience with one particular very valuable engineer on the team, but who had a particularly negative attitude. As I knew practically nothing of his particular line of work, I suggested to him, look, why don't we spend 10 minutes every day to go over your projects and, find if there's any roadblocks, maybe there's something that I could help you with, or even just to bounce ideas. So we did. Each time we met, I really tried to love him by listening, trying to understand the challenges he encountered. I offered some suggestion, and I also tried to pinpoint what could cause him to feel irritated at work. So then I realized that he particularly resented some tasks and also being part of initiatives where he felt he could no longer contribute there. So I tried to clear these off his plates, and there were other employees who were willing to take on the challenges or the tasks that he had before. So little by little, I saw that his level of stress decreased and his attitude changed. He was more joyful in the office and more willing to work with others. Then at one point, a project manager told me how amazed she was at seeing the progress he had made. And she told me, I never thought that he could ever change. So for me, it was a confirmation that nothing is impossible with God's love. So that's one first experience. And then I tell you another. It has to do more about my own experience of how I lived at work, let's say, or my own attitude. So I grew up in a very secular environment, and where it was practically impossible to talk about God without feeling part of a minority group or even being ridiculed. So it made me very shy about sharing anything with coworkers about my faith. But one day I was invited to attend a meeting with other managers and with a new CEO. And he surprised us by asking each one to share one thing that the other people in the room didn't know about us. So I felt, well, maybe this is the opportunity to put my trust in God's love and put aside my shyness. So I shared about my commitment with faith, with the Focolare, and the activities that we locally promoted with the youth and the families and so on. And then, to my surprise, another manager that I didn't know this about him, shared that he was involved in charity work with the St. Vincent de Paul Society. And then at the end, the CEO himself told us that he taught catechism in his parish. So it really turned around my life at work. I was no longer shy about my faith, and many, appreciated my commitment. So again, what seemed at first impossible to me became possible by trusting God. And now that I live in Italy, a couple of coworkers from Canada came to visit Rome, and they wanted us to get together. And so we did. So I feel that my faith has also helped me to build true and long-lasting friendship at work.
Wonderful, Marc. Thank you for sharing those experiences. They're so practical and so hands-on. And I think, God uses us as his instruments. And I think you were an instrument, especially in the second experience, but getting over that shyness. And then you opened up the floor for others to share their faith as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And I wish you a very Merry Christmas.
You're welcome, Nick, and also to all your listeners, Merry Christmas.
Before introducing our next guest, I'd like to invite you to consider making a donation to Focolare Media. Your donation will help us continue producing inspiring podcasts. Visit our website, focolaremedia.com/donate. Thank you in advance for your support. Hi, Rose. Welcome to our podcast. It is a great joy to see you.
Hi, Nick. It's always good to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
Before you share your lovely experience, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I live in Texas and I live with my husband and one of my two sons. And we have horses, and I'm retired from university teaching and just living the good life.
It's beautiful. And I've had the great pleasure of coming to your home. So, yes, we are really happy that if you could share your experience with us.
Surely. Thank you. This last week, I would say there's so many things that just happened to take place when I was home with my mom that made this word of life particularly real for me. So my mom is 97 years old, and she has lived at home fairly independently all these years. 2 weeks ago, my mom surprisingly fell during the night. Then 5 days later, she fell again. With each fall, she was transported by ambulance to different hospitals for x-rays. She did not break any bones. However, her chronic back pain increased significantly and was becoming debilitating. The abundance of pain medication was creating additional problems too. My husband agreed I would go to help, even though we were to host 15 people for Thanksgiving that same week. He offered to stay to host while I was gone. We agreed I would leave the next day for the 9-hour drive home. I trusted God would help me as I was unusually tired. I really wondered how I would do it. Within an hour of our decision, my cousin had heard of my mom's situation and called to say his daughters were driving through the city where I live the next morning and on their way to where my mom lives. The next morning, I was on the way to my mom's with them. When I arrived home, mom had just returned from the second hospital trip, totally exhausted. She had not slept much since her first fall 5 days earlier. The emergency room doctors in the second hospital indicated a probable need for surgery to address a secondary problem that had added to her pain. But due to her age, they instead opted to continue with the treatment that had yet to be effective. So no real treatment from either visit had relieved her situation. 2 days of that continued treatment gave no relief, and new problems from it were surfacing. So we found ourselves on a third ambulance ride as mom was getting weaker and more painful. We fully expected her to be admitted with surgery as the only alternative. Since it was the night before Thanksgiving, staffing was low and the emergency room was full, so it was late when the doctor got the test results we were waiting on. The doctor shared she was not a surgical candidate, and we now were being discharged at 2:00 a.m. We had no car, and even if we were able to get her home, how would she manage to get up the 4 steps into our house? She was too weak to even walk across the hall. I was at a loss for words or solutions. The idea came that maybe mom and I could Uber to a nearby hotel, hoping they had a handicapped accessible room. The Uber driver happened to know people from our little town and was so compassionate in helping mom into his SUV, keeping her warm and helping her into the hotel. The hotel did not have a wheelchair, and the room was too far for her to walk. However, the room happened to have a desk chair on wheels that acted as a wheelchair. Once in the room, the bed seemed impossibly high, but there happened to be some things in the room we could utilize that made it possible for her to get into bed, even as exhausted and weak as she was. It was 3 o'clock a.m. when I left a text for my sister, updating her on the emergency room discharge, the Uber ride, the hotel, and a question about how to get mom into the house the next morning. I had no solutions. At 8 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving morning, I checked my messages to find that many of the impossibilities seemed taken care of. One of my brothers was already building a ramp, and it would be ready by the time we arrived. Another brother, who was out of town, found a last-minute flight home and would meet us at my mom's house to help. My nephew came to lift my mom into the car so we could go home. A wheelchair and walker were waiting for us at home from a neighbor, and then, about this time, my mom happened to receive word that her dear friend who had left the church a few years earlier had returned. Mom had been praying for this for a long time. Numerous notes of love, support, and prayers from family and friends around the U.S. came in. It seemed so comforting to my mom for me to read them to her. At the end, she tearfully said, "I have felt every prayer." Although her pain and challenges remained, we both were aware that it was as if Jesus was assuring us of his presence throughout as she suffered these many things. I had been sleeping with my mom to be able to help her during the night. One morning she woke and we just started visiting about all kinds of things. She usually needs her hearing aids to hear, but at that moment, speaking in quiet voices, she happened to hear everything. Mom and the family agreed it was time to hire professional caregiving to assist my sister during the night. But who? Our town is small and we had no ideas as to who to ask. This truly felt like an impossibility. We discussed all the recent impossibilities that God had taken care of and trusted he would take care of this one too. The first step was to get the word out. On the very first call, we received the name of someone in a nearby town. She happened to have cared for several others over the years who we knew and came highly recommended. And she happened to be available for night caregiving and could start on the day we needed her. The next day, the caregiver met my mom and family and was hired. We all agreed she seemed like the perfect fit for my mom and my sister. Mom tearfully said, "This has been the worst and the best Thanksgiving ever. Truly, nothing is impossible with God."
Thank you. That's such a beautiful experience, and give her our Christmas wishes.
Thank you, Nick. And Merry Christmas to you too.
So thank you for joining us today. I hope you've been inspired by the wonderful stories shared. I look forward to being with you again next month. To listen to a reflection and a commentary on the Word of Life, log on to your favorite podcast platform and look for Word of Life Podcast by Focolare Media. There, you'll be able to listen to previous episodes. I also invite you to join me each month for new episodes. You can also read additional experiences in Living City magazine. If you have a story that you would like to share, please let me know. Write to nick.chanfarani@focolaremedia.com. Bye for now, God bless, and Merry Christmas.